She was once called the most beautiful woman in European cinema, a timeless face, a symbol of grace, and a star who lit up the screen beside legends like Alain Delon and Marcello Mastroianni. For decades, Claudia Cardinale was the definition of classic beauty and mysterious elegance. But as Hollywood chased newer faces, Claudia took a different path, quietly stepping away from the glare of American fame and continuing her craft far from the headlines. There were no scandals, no dramatic farewells, just a graceful move into a quieter, more personal chapter. For years, fans wondered, what happened to her? Why did one of the most sought-after actresses in the world turn her back on the fame others spent a lifetime chasing? Was it disillusionment, or something far more personal? The truth is, Claudia Cardinale didn't fade away. She transformed, quietly, powerfully, and entirely on her own terms. Now at 87, she's reappeared in headlines, and the world can't stop talking. Not because of some shocking scandal or plastic surgery transformation, but because she's become a living contradiction in a world obsessed with youth and reinvention. This isn't just a story about a movie star. It's about identity, independence, and the price of staying true to yourself when the world wants you to be someone else. And trust me, what Claudia chose to do with her life after stepping away from the limelight is going to change the way you see her forever. Claudia Cardinale's story begins in one of the most unlikely places for a future European icon, North Africa. She was born in Tunisia to a family with deep Sicilian roots. The neighborhood she grew up in was a melting pot of languages, cultures, and contradictions. French was spoken in the streets, Arabic at the markets, and at home, a dialect of Sicilian that most Italians wouldn't even recognize. She didn't speak a word of Italian until years later. Ironically, she would go on to become one of Italy's most celebrated actresses, while never quite feeling like she belonged to any one place. And that tension between identity and expectation would follow her throughout her life. At school, she was quiet, not shy exactly, but detached, almost observing the world from a step away. Teachers called her wild. Friends said she seemed older than her age, like she carried secrets no one else could see. And maybe she did, because even then, something about Claudia drew attention. Not just her looks, but the way she held herself, calm, curious, and entirely unbothered by what people thought of her. She didn't chase the spotlight. It found her. While other girls her age were pinning movie posters to their walls, Claudia wasn't interested in fame. But one woman did make her look twice: Brigitte Bardot. The way Bardot challenged every rule, owned her presence, and refused to apologize. Claudia took note. She wouldn't become a copy of Bardot. She'd become something entirely her own. But that transformation didn't start on a film set. It began on a small stage on the outskirts of Tunisia. It was supposed to be a casual event, just a small beauty contest, the kind held every summer in Tunisia. Claudia didn't even want to enter. It was her mother and a teacher who pushed her into it. She didn't smile for the cameras. She didn't flirt with the judges. But when she walked across the stage, the crowd went quiet. She was crowned the most beautiful Italian girl in Tunisia. And with that, everything changed. Almost overnight, Claudia found herself swept into a whirlwind of attention she never asked for. Film producers started circling. Magazines wanted interviews. She was flown to the Venice Film Festival, where photographers and directors treated her like she already was a star. But Claudia didn't play along. In fact, she turned down every film offer that came her way. She didn't trust the industry. And more than that, she didn't want to be owned by it. But life has a way of forcing your hand. Behind the glamour and glowing headlines, Claudia was hiding something that could have ended her chances in an industry obsessed with image and control. She was pregnant. Still a teenager, Claudia faced a decision most young women could barely imagine. She didn't name the father publicly. She refused to play into tabloid gossip, but she knew she needed stability. And suddenly, those film contracts she once dismissed started to look like a lifeline. Her first acting roles weren't glamorous. She didn't have formal training, but she had something else: presence, the kind you can't fake, and the kind that directors immediately recognized. She told no one about the child. Not for years. She kept working, quietly supporting her son, while crafting the image the world expected from her. And through it all, she kept her secret. In a world that wanted to own every piece of her, Claudia Cardinale held on to the one part they couldn't touch. Claudia didn't dream of the red carpet, but once she stepped in front of a camera, directors couldn't look away. She had a magnetism that didn't scream for attention. It quietly demanded it. Her breakout role came in I Soliti Ignoti, and from there, her rise felt inevitable. Italian cinema embraced her. So did France. And soon, Hollywood came calling. But Claudia Cardinale wasn't like the other rising stars of the time. She didn't conform. She didn't chase approval. And behind her soft voice and striking eyes, there was steel. While studios were grooming young actresses to fit a certain mold, Claudia didn't bend. She refused to pose nude, even when it meant losing major roles. She kept her son a secret, determined to shield him from the public eye. And she insisted on playing characters with depth, even if they weren't always flattering. American producers struggled with her. Her thick French-Italian accent made her harder to market to English-speaking audiences. In The Pink Panther, her voice was dubbed over, not because she couldn't speak, but because she wouldn't flatten herself to fit a mold. Hollywood expected gratitude. Claudia gave them silence. She was promoted as a sex symbol, but unlike her contemporaries, she didn't sell scandal or seduction. She sold mystery, and it made her unforgettable. What audiences didn't see was her growing discomfort with the machine behind the screen. The constant pressure to change herself, the obsession with youth, exposure, and image. Claudia loved acting, but not the circus that came with it. So at the peak of her international fame, she made a decision that shocked everyone. She left, not with a press conference or a dramatic exit, just a quiet step back into the shadows of European cinema, where she could choose her own roles and her own rules. But even away from Hollywood, the comparisons didn't stop, especially to one woman, Brigitte Bardot. The world wanted a rivalry. From the moment Claudia Cardinale started gaining fame, the comparisons were inevitable. Two European icons, two impossible beauties. One blonde, one brunette, one provocative, the other reserved. Brigitte Bardot was wild, untamed, and unapologetically sexual. Claudia, by contrast, seemed wrapped in elegance and quiet power. They were nothing alike, but that only fueled the media's obsession. Headlines pitted them against each other. Photographers followed them, hoping to catch a glance, a glare, a cold shoulder. In public, Bardot was chaos and charisma. Claudia was poised and distant, which made people assume she was cold. But in truth, she just wasn't interested in being a spectacle. What most people don't know? There was never a feud. In fact, the only time they ever shared the screen was in The Legend of Frenchy King, a spaghetti western released in 1971. It should have been a Hollywood tabloid dream. Two rivals forced to co-star. Drama guaranteed, right? Wrong. Claudia showed up in a stunning black satin dress for the film's premiere. Bardot arrived in full costume, dressed as a man, wild and grinning. The press leaned in, waiting for sparks to fly. But there were no icy stares or backstage fights. Just two women, two icons, both fully aware that their legacies were already secure. And here's what's most fascinating. While Bardot became known for her scandalous image and eventual retreat into isolation, Claudia carved a different path. She never relied on controversy. She never used her body as bait. She never posed nude. Not once in her decades-long career. And yet, she stayed relevant, respected. In a world that demanded women bear it all to stay in the spotlight, Claudia kept her mystery. And somehow, that made her even more powerful. For someone as famous as Claudia Cardinale, her love life was surprisingly quiet. The tabloids tried to dig, but there was never much to find. No messy divorces, no whirlwind romances splashed across covers. Just one man, Franco Cristaldi. He wasn't just her mentor. He was the man who discovered her, believed in her before anyone else did, and helped shape her early career. Cristaldi was a powerful film producer in Italy, and for years, Claudia was known as his companion, his muse, some said. They married quietly in the early 1960s, but their relationship was anything but typical. Cristaldi controlled many aspects of her professional life. He managed her image, chose many of her roles, and kept her hidden pregnancy a secret from the public. Claudia once described their relationship as complex, filled with both gratitude and quiet resentment. She appreciated his support, but she also knew she was being managed, not loved freely. Eventually, she walked away, not just from the relationship, but from the idea of needing any man to define her life. She never remarried. When asked why, Claudia gave an answer that silenced every interviewer. "I want to be completely free." In a time when actresses were often pressured to settle down, she refused. She raised her son on her own. She kept her independence. And even as society whispered about her choices, Claudia stayed unmoved. There's something incredibly powerful about a woman who doesn't chase partnership as a goal. For Claudia, love wasn't about appearances or validation, it was about truth. And if it wasn't on her terms, she didn't want it. Her story wasn't one of loneliness, it was one of strength. But even the strongest roles left their mark, and some cut deeper than anyone realized. On screen, Claudia Cardinale often played women who were strong, tragic, or quietly broken. But what most viewers didn't know was that those roles sometimes cut deeper than they were meant to. Claudia once said, "When I act, I don't pretend. I become someone else completely." And that commitment came at a price. In Girl with a Suitcase, she played a desperate, drifting woman looking for love in all the wrong places. In Once Upon a Time in the West, she portrayed a widow surrounded by violence, carrying silent pain. These weren't just performances. They were emotional excavations. Claudia didn't just act the pain. She felt it. Directors praised her for her depth, but few knew what it took out of her to get there. She never spoke much about her mental state during filming, but insiders noticed her energy shift after especially demanding roles. She wasn't the type to cry on set, but she carried those characters long after the cameras stopped rolling. For a while, the pressure was relentless. Film after film, city after city. The lines between Claudia and the roles she played began to blur, but something shifted in the 2000s. Instead of chasing film scripts, she turned to the stage. Theater gave her something she hadn't felt in years: control. No dubbing, no over-editing, just her voice, her pace, her truth. Performances in plays like La Veneziana and Come tu mi vuoi reminded critics and fans alike that Claudia wasn't just a film icon. She was a performer, heart and soul. And unlike the screen, where takes were repeated until they were perfect, theater demanded presence, realness, a kind of raw, living emotion that reconnected her to why she started acting in the first place. It didn't just renew her career, it renewed her. After decades of becoming other people, Claudia had finally found a place where she could simply be herself. In an industry obsessed with youth, Claudia Cardinale chose the one path that almost no one dared to take. She embraced aging, completely and unapologetically. As the years passed and her contemporaries began smoothing out wrinkles and chasing youthful features through surgery, Claudia stood still, not frozen by fear or denial, but grounded in a quiet defiance. "I hate the idea of a facelift," She once said, "You can't stop time." Those 5 words, simple yet defiant, summed up everything that made Claudia different. While other actresses tried to turn back the clock, she turned her attention inward. She focused on staying active, not looking younger, on staying interested, not appearing ageless. And audiences noticed. In photos taken well into her 80s, Claudia still carried that unmistakable presence. Yes, the lines were there, the softness around the eyes, the changes time brings, but she never lost that calm, regal energy. In fact, many fans say she looked more powerful with age, like her beauty had evolved into something deeper, something earned. And while some critics whispered that she had let herself age, Claudia responded by living louder. She continued acting. She took on theater. She even made appearances at major film festivals, walking the red carpet with her natural hair, natural face, and the same poise that made her famous. In today's world, where aging gracefully is often just code for aging secretly, Claudia's refusal to alter herself is nothing short of radical. She didn't just avoid cosmetic surgery. She rejected the very idea that women needed to look a certain way to remain relevant. Her beauty was never just about symmetry or youth. It was about presence, voice, and conviction. And even in her late 80s, Claudia Cardinale remained a woman who turned heads, not because she chased beauty standards, but because she never needed to. In 2023, Claudia Cardinale made headlines again, but not for a comeback role or a scandal. This time, it was her wardrobe that caught the world's attention. She announced she would be auctioning off her personal collection of gowns, accessories, and iconic outfits worn throughout her career. But this wasn't just fashion memorabilia, it was a statement. "These clothes," she said, "represent the story of women breaking free." And that's exactly what they were. Among the collection was a shimmering Nina Ricci haute couture gown she wore to the Oscars in 1965. Another piece, a black satin dress with pink sequins, was what she chose for the premiere of The Legend of Frenchy King, where she co-starred with Bardot. To fans, these were timeless garments. To Claudia, they were symbols of freedom, femininity, and self-possession. Each dress marked a chapter. Each piece carried memories of a different version of herself, a role, a moment, a decision that shaped her legacy. The auction wasn't about vanity, it was about legacy. And for Claudia, it was also about liberation. Not just hers, but every woman's. Because her style had never been about flashing skin or chasing trends. It was about strength wrapped in silk, power stitched into elegance. Her wardrobe, like her career, was proof that you didn't have to scream to be heard. You just had to show up as yourself, unapologetically. The sale drew global interest. Collectors, designers, fans, all wanted a piece of her past. Not just because the clothes were rare, but because they carried the spirit of a woman who never conformed. In letting go of those garments, Claudia wasn't erasing her history. She was honoring it. And once again, without a word, she reminded the world what it means to age, to evolve, and to stand tall in your own story. Claudia Cardinale never needed to raise her voice to be heard. She didn't chase fame, and she didn't cling to it either. What she built, slowly, deliberately, was a life of depth, control, and quiet rebellion. She defied expectations in every chapter of her story. She rejected scandal. She resisted cosmetic pressure. She walked away from Hollywood at its loudest, and somehow became even more iconic by doing so. She once said, "If you want, you can." And those words weren't just a motto. They were a map. Today, at 87, Claudia Cardinale doesn't just remind us of what was. She shows us what still can be. A life led with intention. A legacy defined by choice. And maybe that's the most powerful role she ever played.